This is the 2020 Ford Edge ST, and it's fake fast. I'm the Roman, and this is Race to the... You know what? Forget an intro. Let's talk about this. The Ford Edge ST has a 2.7-liter twin turbocharged V6, making 335 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. And all I can think is, yeah, it pulls quite nicely. But fake fast is really the best way I can put it. And what I mean by fake fast is that it's sort of like somebody strapped a fire extinguisher to an office chair. Sure, it's gonna do numbers on Vine in 2006, but it doesn't feel like there's anything more to the experience than speed and irony. True fast is about everything surrounding the experience of speed. The road feel, the handling, the sense of control and self-assuredness that allows you to truly enjoy all that acceleration. But the Ford Edge ST doesn't really give you that. It's a sport utility vehicle that emphasizes sport at the expense of utility. As if Ford never thought harder about why a person should want to drive this other than, big thing, go fast, I'm Ford. And the end result is an SUV that I'm not sure anybody was asking Ford to make in the first place. Not like this, anyway. This is a steak dinner served with corporate pizza party portion sizes. You're getting thin slices of carefully rationed excitement, financed adrenaline, a fast-paced freewheeling identity to equip and discard between commutes. I am speed, you say, as the call from your divorce lawyer rings out over Bluetooth. And let me tell you something else. No matter how fast you're burning through the Northeast Extension, it's nowhere near as hot as the hole this $44,000 turbocharged casting couch is going to burn through your wallet. So, is the Ford Edge ST bad enough to make my bottom 5? Well, I'm the Roman. This is Race to the Bottom, and I guess I just did an intro after all. Let's continue my search for the worst car in the world and see if the Ford Edge ST fits the bill. On this Ford, there's an ST badge, but it's just an SUV. 2020 Ford Edge ST, the official car for hipsters, once the world's irony reserves are depleted. The Ford Edge has no edge. None. It has as much edge as the numerical value of its edge, which is 0. But then, the Ford Edge ST weaponizes ironic detachment, because Ford knows you think this is uncool. Ford knows you think you're above ever driving something this mundane. Ford knows you think this twin turbocharged cul-de-sac crawler is all bark and no bite. Just another sport crossover that's bulky, but not too bulky, you know? I mean, look at it. It looks like it's on the same level of responsible testosterone usage as a BMX rider trying to heal a broken arm. Except it's not. The Ford Edge ST wears the costume of normalcy while trying to appeal to more impulsive, lead-footed instincts. This is an SUV that's hopped up on black market senzu beans while trying to remain presentable to the in-laws, and maybe that absurd contrast is precisely what Ford was going for. An SUV for the meme age. A car that hipsters can justify by saying, well, it's not supposed to be a performance car. It's a deconstruction of the SUV. It gives you over 300 horsepower, even though you're never going to use it because who could possibly need all that power for a 15-minute commute between a house in Westchester and an office building in Lower Garbageport. See? The Ford Edge is in on the joke, and so am I. Me, the guy who made fun of you in high school, who's now trying to sell you real estate. And look, whether or not Ford was self-aware enough to put out a car that's fake fast, you know, with spec numbers that look good on a window sticker, but acceleration that feels disappointing between exits, the truth about the Ford Edge ST is that Well, it isn't a bad car. Not really. It's perfectly acceptable, but it makes my balloon knot itch to think about what this could have been had Ford really tried to craft an SUV that would be worthy of the ST badge. This 8-speed automatic is fine in a passing grade sort of way. It doesn't lag enough to notice, but it's not as immediately responsive either. It's almost like it has to think a bit longer between shifts than it should have to. And it's okay once it gets there, but I can't say it complemented the turbo all that well. And while I wouldn't say the visibility is terrible or anything, these big chunky pillars can be kind of obstructive in certain situations. I didn't hate the suspension, but like the transmission, it didn't feel optimized for the engine pairing. And the steering feels a bit looser than it should. You never get the sense that the car is doing exactly what you want it to, when you want it to. Although, in its defense, it does have to shift a lot more weight around, so I guess, I don't know, it's just... This has speed and power for days, but it doesn't have the same confident feel of the cars that share the ST badge. The good ones, anyway. Hell, I liked the Ford Fiesta Titanium way better than this, even while acknowledging that this isn't terrible. But even if this is a post-ironic, hipster-aligned SUV that Ford built to appeal to people who think they're above that sort of thing, I'm not sure that what it gets you is worth cheapening the legacy of the ST badge. And yeah, it does have a legacy. I get that, car culture kind of views it as a sort of punching bag sometimes, but there's a lot more to that badge. And look, sure, Ford, do whatever keeps your profit margins healthy. Totally, just make it go faster, but don't change enough about the suspension or the steering to better align the handling and the road feel with all that extra speed. Whatever, you do you. Be fake fast all day if you want. But don't be fake fun, Because that was kind of the social contract of the ST badge. While they weren't the only cars to have the badge, I feel like the ST was the signifier for hot hatch legends like the Ford Focus ST and the Ford Fiesta ST. And while I know a crossover SUV shouldn't be expected to do the same things a hatchback can do, I was hoping that this Ford Edge ST would capture a similar spirit of reckless, carefree fun. Those hot hatch heroes gave you horsepower, they gave you plenty of torque, they gave you confident handling, even if the handling wasn't always tight, and they gave you a manual transmission, and they did it all for under $25,000. It was budget-conscious performance in a package scaled for mischief. You didn't even get 200 horsepower, but nobody cared because it wasn't a car where the power figures mattered. It was just a light little car with a manual transmission and a turbocharged engine that was, to rearrange some of the letters around and replace a vowel, feisty. It was raucous. It was cheap fun that was sort of like driving a go-kart on the highway. You drive a go-kart, you can't be anything other than locked in. And along those same lines, the Focus ST felt just as connective. And look, I haven't always loved the Ford Focus, but there was a savage honesty to that little hatch. It didn't need compensatory styling to trick you into giving it a second look. It didn't need an aggressive and pronounced stance. The Focus ST gave you what you were expecting, for the most part. It was unglamorous and less revered than the Fiesta, but it was a sincere car for an age before irony poisoning took root, and people became unable to tell the difference between what they actually liked and the things they just sort of liked ironically. With the Focus ST, you got around 252 horsepower on a chassis sturdy enough to handle the 270 pound-feet of torque you'd get from factory, and handling that was responsive enough to keep things interesting. It was an American GTI, a hot hatch that blended the greatest hits of the hot hatch market into an affordable package. But now, we have this. And well, You name me a greatest hits album that actually improves the closer you get to the more recent stuff. And again, I get it, the Ford Edge ST has to move more weight, and it's aimed at a different crowd. And in its defense, it isn't some abject automotive disaster. I didn't hate the driving experience, I just found it forgettable. Another SUV in a crowded market where bland, unchallenging, tech-forward comfort with enough power to boast about on Reddit has become the rule rather than some sort of exception. But this isn't an ST. Not really. It's a badge borrower, a decal deceiver. It's the awkward middle sibling of the Escape and the Explorer, and like an awkward middle sibling, it suffers for not just being itself. Ford Edge ST. Proof that you can give a crossover more horses than a glue factory, but that doesn't make it a Ferrari. However, there are some things I genuinely like here. I do like the seats and the overall cabin layout. Now, people will accuse the design of being outdated, but that's one of the things I like most. Check out these buttons for temperature control. Sure, you have to go through the menu to see what temperature you're actually setting it to, but I don't view that as a deal breaker because no car I've ever owned has had a digital temperature display anyway, so I don't care. I like the cargo space, which is improved considerably by these ridiculously springy fold-down seats. While the sport aspect is still prioritized, all of this shows that the utility part of the SUV hasn't been entirely forgotten, and I appreciated that. Oh, also, these cooled seats. I seriously never thought ventilated seats would be this much of a mood stimulant, but here we are. I've never been more thankful for shrinkage. Now, I don't love that these are automatic high beams, apparently, but that's mostly because I don't like the idea of unintentionally blinding people. But I can understand how these would be a very useful feature. And while I'm not a fan of gear shift knobs generally, I didn't really hate this one. Although again, the automatic transmission is about as basic as any other modern Ford automatic. Had it been a manual, I imagine this would have been more engaging, but then Ford manuals could be as hit or miss as some of their automatics could be. But hey, the fact that this automatic isn't the 10R80 is something worth celebrating. But then we kind of have to come back to the negatives, unfortunately, because there are structural problems at the design level here. And I'm not even talking about the weird whistle that sounds like it's coming from the rear diff, or maybe just the bearings. No, I'm talking about things like the factory oil pan being plastic on a car from this current decade. Look, I don't know enough about the brass tacks of automotive development to ascertain why Ford would do this other than to save money. But it's miraculous there haven't been any recalls over it since they're supposedly prone to warping and causing leaks. There are aftermarket solutions, but that's like saying you should have to download new software to install a video game you already paid for. This is just an odd car that generates odd thoughts. Why does popcorn always taste bad in dreams? Of course, that's not the only odd thing here. There's no hood liner, yet for some reason you do get an engine cover that feels like foam. Maybe a previous owner removed the hood liner, I'm not sure, and neither is our terrific volunteer Nick, who's only owned this car for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and already, it's probably going to need some work. All I can think about the lack of insulation is that maybe it's meant to complement the engine sounds that get piped into the cabin. Oh yeah, that's right. Active noise control is back because these fake exhaust tips weren't insulting enough. I could almost understand this on an electric car just to provide the familiar sounds of internal combustion. But does Ford just have so little faith in their twin turbo that they need to pipe in these Winamp, real player, action movie sounds? You're not making the cabin sound cooler, Ford. You're making the engine sound worse. And for what? So we can make believe we're on a racetrack? You know what? Actually, I shouldn't talk, because a track experience was something Ford offered to new owners of the Edge ST. And, as Nick explained, the original owner took Ford up on it. Now, this all included a trip to a racetrack to drive the car after its assembly, and supposedly came with an overnight hotel stay, which, if nothing else, all seems like a good way to hammer on the car to make sure it doesn't fall apart right off rip. It doesn't seem like they offer it for the Edge anymore, although you can get the ST SUV experience with the Explorer, so I guess you can cosplay a police officer in hot pursuit. Although it's a curated driving experience, so I doubt you'll be able to act a proper fool, but hey, it can be a nice little vacation, I guess. But ultimately, I still struggle with the value of what's on offer here versus what you're expected to pay. Kelley Blue Book had the 2020 MSRP around $44,000, but depending on where you shopped, this could climb above $50,000. Now, Nick and his fiancée thought they'd found a great used model in their price range before the dealer dropped the bomb that the advertised price was a mistake and it was actually $3,000 higher than listed. The salesman said they could get a discount if they were veterans or active military or recent graduates, or if they had purchased a new vehicle from the same dealership within the last 3 years. But discounts basically would top out at around $1,000 max. And to really rub the salt in, unless they use the dealer's in-house financing, there would be an additional $2,000 finance charge. Mind you, this in-house financing required an 800 credit score to get their best interest rate, between 9 and 11%. All told, the modest sub-$20,000 deal they thought they had found had ballooned to over $25,000 before taxes. On a 5-year-old, used Ford Edge with an accident history. And confident he had him by the nuts, the dealer then went on to brag that they'd never be able to find a comparable car for a better price. So Nick and his fiancée said bet and walked out. And a week later, they found this Ford Edge ST for $10,000 less somewhere else. And you know, for around $15,000, it's really not bad. I could complain all day about how the ST badge sets a false expectation, and that this will never escape the fake fast accusation. But in the real world, people don't need these SUVs to be more than what they are. They don't need to be challenging. They don't need to be engaging, even if they can be. A bland box of movable space with decent technology is really all these need to be. And you know, admittedly, I'm a little envious. I think I respect my Camry more than I love it, and so part of me just wishes sometimes that I had a car with a few more tech or creature comforts, but then I tell myself no, because that's just more stuff that could potentially go wrong, and sometimes less really is more. But then I drive something like this, and I think, you know, this is nice. I could probably be happy with this. Maybe not long term, but at least for a little while. And so I see the vision. And the people who drive these sure as hell aren't less for driving them. I just think they deserve a better car than another colorless brick in the wall. I mean, if you're going to make a performance SUV, then actually make one. Don't just turbocharge the base model and then leave the same architecture intact except for a nominally stiffer suspension, because it'll be fun for a while. But the thrill is going to wear off quicker than bathroom cologne. If you're trying to do something that's already been done, you need to do it as well or better. Otherwise, you're damned by comparison to the ill-fitting legacy you're trying to wear. Plenty of people get the hand-me-downs of older siblings, but they don't try to pretend that a Kmart sweater has a Prada tag on its neck. This is going to be the shortest one ever. Does the 2020 Ford Edge ST make the bottom 5? No. No, it doesn't. And that also makes this among the very few offerings of 2025 so far to avoid landing there. It has been a rich year of bad cars being sent my way by our amazing viewers, which is exactly what I want. You guys never let me down, and I never want to let you down. So let's do more of these. Let's make more of these. If you think you have the car that can win the race to the bottom, or you have a car you think Brian might want to review, send me an email at regularcarstheroman@gmail.com and include in the subject whether it's for RCR, Race to the Bottom, or either. And if this channel adds any sort of value to your week, please consider leaving a like, a comment, subscribing, or sharing the video with someone you think would enjoy it. But if you want to support RCR in the biggest way possible, please consider joining our Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can get these videos early, along with other exclusive content, and help the channel continue to provide you the most unique car reviews you'll find anywhere. Thank you to Nick for volunteering his car and his time, and for meeting me with kindness and generosity. I hope to pay that forward to the next volunteer. Oh wait, the next volunteer is Nick's brother? Oh, okay, cool. And thank you for watching. None of this happens without you. Have a great week. A big, fake, fast SUV. You're like the okayest car in the world. Fine for Ford, badged ST. It's happy to fit on the edge of your world.